So we have requested an Uber and waiting for Toyota Highlander. Well, guys, it's finally happened. I'm in Times Square, Manhattan, New York City, New York State, United States of America. I told you that Russians knows this place because too often we can see this in Hollywood movies, in different travel shows and documentaries that look great, just great, you know. You know, I see so many people here, different languages I hear, different faces I see. And another interesting thing about the United States is that for just one day here, I have seen as many black-skinned people as I never seen before for all of my life. Yeah. Definitely, New York City is have a lot in common with Moscow. It's huge and it's impressive. Of course, they have a different architectural style, but you know, here is something what really unites the cities, New York City and Moscow. And you know, seeing so many people here, so many different people, I definitely, at least in New York, don't feel like I'm not from here or so. It's just a place for everyone. At least that's how I feel. Here's like it's such a stairway. And the best place to make a selfie or a photo is on the top of this. Let's check it out. told you that Russians knows mostly just Times Square, Manhattan, World Trade Center, about the New York City. But there also one more thing that Russians knows about the New York. It's Brighton Beach. Brighton Beach is the place where located probably the biggest Russian community in the United States. And that's where I will go now. And this time I will go there not on Uber, but on a subway. At least because I want to see what is the New York subway. You guys stay with me. Comment, like, and subscribe. See you in the next video.
Hello, YouTube land. This is Brent and Son coming to you from Lexington, Kentucky, the Bluegrass State. Now, we are going to listen to part 2 of Tina's story. And if you haven't seen that story, I will put it in the menu. If you hover your mouse or tap your screen, the screen on the video, you'll see a little white dot pop up on the top right corner, and if you click that little white dot, it'll give you a drop down menu, and the video is called Two Angry Sasquatch Take Elderly Lady and then Missing Person, something like that. Sometimes I change the titles, as I look through and try to optimize it for the search engine, but it basically was a story about Tina. It starts out with Tina telling us about her mother having an encounter with a Sasquatch when she was a child. And this Sasquatch was rocking the streamline, one of those silver round looking streamline type trailers that you camp in. And her parents were basically pulling up to the camping area, and this Sasquatch was rocking this streamline thing, and so her mother knew something about Sasquatch. Fast forward, and now her mother has children, and Tina and her sister were in a house that they were going to be in for like 2 weeks that the grandparents owned, and they were going to be going to live somewhere else. And anyway, they were in this transition place for a couple weeks. They got to know the elderly lady that lived right across from them. This is way out in the boonies. There was only 2 houses out there, miles and miles and miles away from any other houses. Well, the elderly lady was a really nice lady. She would make them little snacks and cookies and give them venison and stuff out of her deep freeze on the porch, and they would mess around in the garden with the elderly lady, and they just loved this little old lady. Well, one night her mother wakes Tina up with a hand over her mouth and said, "Don't say a word." and she was thinking, what in the heck's going on here? And the mother had woke the other child up too, which her sister was a little older than her. And basically, her mom was kept looking out the window from Tina's room, and there was two Sasquatch howling, making howling noises, and that samurai chatter type, whatever they were doing. It was something similar to that. She said it sounded kind of like a hearing impaired person trying to talk, but it was real fast, chattery. And then these yells, like these things were angry, two of them on the porch of this old lady's house. So the mother was trying to get them, keep an eye on what was going on and get them into the cellar. This was in Oklahoma. So typically you have tornado cellars or shelters that you can take refuge in from inside the house. Many times that's the way that works. And basically, as they were watching for a little bit, and the mother had a gun, but she was not thinking about using it, kind of thing. She gets them just getting into the shelter. They can still hear these things making all kinds of noise, angry sounding, and what have you. And then they heard a really loud crashing and a scream, and like something happened. And about 4 hours later, the police and sheriffs and whatever people responded, probably state troopers, sheriffs, or something like that. They showed up. The elderly lady was gone. There was blood and like a disturbance. They thought maybe someone broke in and just robbed the lady or something like that. They didn't want to tell what they had saw. I'm sure that they were asking, but they didn't want to say, I saw a couple Bigfoot on the porch. And so they kind of I think they played dumb, basically, about it, to not be labeled as a nutcase kind of thing. And the mother didn't really tell Tina a whole lot about that part of talking to the police and what have you, trying to shelter her children from it somewhat. And later in life, the mother ends up dying, and the one regret that she had was not being able to help that elderly lady. But she did not want to draw attention to her home, because they had already had activity like scratching down the walls. And the elderly lady kept saying, since these were young women, her sister had, gotten to the age where she had cycles, female things. And she said, don't be putting that stuff in the garbage cans outside. And of course they had done that. And it drew the attention to their home to where they were having bangs on the walls from outside and scratching down the walls and all kinds of things like that. So anyway, it's a very intense story. If you haven't seen it, like I said, click the little circle up here on the top right. It'll give you a drop down menu, and you can find the two angry Sasquatch on an elderly lady and stuff like that's in the title, whatever I ended up naming it, something similar to that. Watch that one. And this is when Tina has gotten older, and she's out on her own now, and she moves to a place, and she had put all this out of her mind. All this, she didn't really want to believe in a Bigfoot kind of thing. She knows what she saw, but she blocked it out, and that's what most people do when they have a traumatic experience. I had done it, and later I ended up asking my sister about what we had saw and what had happened, and my sister confirmed it, and that's exactly what she did. She talked to her sister as an adult, and her sister said, man, this was no dream. This was no hallucination. This isn't made up in your mind. It happened. and of course the mother having those regrets as she died. So it was a very traumatic thing, and I think Tina's going to get past it. But this is the rest of the story from an adult and coming to terms with realizing there are such things as Bigfoot, and what happened when she was a kid was no imagination. It was no dream or anything like that. It was real. Hope you enjoy. We were at where you were jogging, okay?
Yeah, I would go out jogging, all right, and because I do not that this matters, but I do modeling, and and you got to keep your shape, or you're not going to keep, you're not going to be able to pay the bills if you don't keep yourself, in shape, of course.
Right.
So I got to go out there and work out, and my boyfriend was like, you need to not wear those headphones when you're out in the wilderness because there could be bears or whatever. But after a while, I would go walking, further. I started taking further walks out in the wilderness, right?
Right.
Pushing it further and further, deeper out in the woods.
Right.
And I get this feeling like I was being watched. It's a primal thing that we have in us, and I believe it never goes away. I think we don't listen to it enough, and we should. We all have it in us.
Right.
If we choose whether or not to pay attention to it is what matters.
Right.
And I'm telling you, I felt it. And once again, I'm going to say that the places that I was at are known spots that Sasquatches have been reportedly seen in the last 3 or 4 years, a lot.
Right.
And of course, when you think about it, the Sierras, mountains, there are prime. There's tons of white-tailed deer. There's rabbits. There's raccoons. There's tons of coyotes.
Right.
Tons of coyotes. There's bears.
Right.
There's lakes out there, little lakes and stuff with fish. We have a lot of wild horses.
Yeah.
In fact, in Nevada, they have a lot, if you break it, and take it, it's yours.
Right. Yeah, the Sierras are well known. I mean, even the Sierra Sounds and all that kind of stuff.
It's everybody knows, they love that. It's perfect for them.
Right.
Well, one time, my boyfriend met a guy, and he offered to take us up on a hiking trail, right? And he was a little weird because he had all these little secret spots, and he would have to say that he'd have to get to know us better and better to show us more of it,
Right.
And I was like, show us what? And he goes, spots that that are, I don't show too many people. Well, one place he took us to, you know how you have to be able to check mushrooms to make sure they're not psychedelic.
Yeah.
And I found delicious mushrooms and sweet onions and a lot of delicious foods that grew out there naturally.
Right.
I had no idea. Like I said, I'm city. I didn't know. Well, I'm sorry, excuse me. The second time he took us, there was this, teepee structure built. And I was like, oh, look. I go, look at some kids or something must have built it. God, I was like, wow, they built this good. And I went up on it and I go, that thing stinks. And he goes, you need to leave that alone. And he got really, angry, adamant.
Yeah.
And my boyfriend said, all she's doing is looking at it. He goes, no. He goes, she needs to leave it alone, and we need to go now. And the trees all around there all have the bark peeled off of them. And then one tree, I'm sorry, again, looked like God, there was a couple of them knocked over, and they were just like pulverized. They were fresh trees. They weren't dead trees. They were like, I thought maybe it must have been a bear that just clawed into them, like just clawed them up.
Yeah.
And, you know, we would hear a lot of, you know, at first I didn't think anything of it, a lot of, like, click, 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 like rocks, you know?
Right.
And, you know, I didn't back then think much of it. Now, I'm like, my God, you know, now I get it. But then I didn't think anything of it. I just thought, you know, it's forest sounds. People, you know, people out here, you know, there's people, you know, doing, you know, something, or, you know, camping or whatever, you know. So
the encounters when you were a kid and you saw them things on the porch and stuff like that of that ladies, you were thinking it was a big giant Frankenstein looking thing, but did you ever think it was Sasquatch, or was that later that
when I got older and I saw the Patterson and Gimlin footage, my life changed. That's when I started having panic attacks. When I saw that, everything changed. My whole world changed.
So you figured this out late. You just figured this out later then, and you didn't know.
They're not supposed to exist. Do you understand? That's a monster.
Right.
And the thing I did notice that night was their eyes. Because you got to understand, we had a good vision on them. My mom had her binoculars.
Right. And
when she was looking through it, she'd let us look through it. I don't know if she should have let me look through that.
Right.
You know, I think she wanted us to know what was out there. You know, she always, you know, made us. You know, she wanted us to be aware.
So before she
didn't
made
know what was going to happen to it that night, but their eye gave off a weird amber glow. Do you know what I mean? Like an amberish glow?
Yeah. So before she made you get into the cellar, she actually let you look?
Yeah, we were there for about 30 minutes.
And then she made you get in the cellar?
It took that long to get that dog out from underneath the bed.
Oh, okay. All right.
Oh my God, the dog. Plus, like I told you, this is really embarrassing. When they started making those sounds,
yeah,
it made my insides reverberate. You know, I was a little girl.
Yeah.
And I lost my bowels, so my mother had to take me to the bathroom, and she told my two sisters to stay down, and she had to clean me up and, you know, get me dressed all in the dark.
Right.
You know, because I lost my bowels. I saw that when they turned around and looked over, you know, they just like every once in a while they look over at the place, you know.
Right.
And I just lost it. It was like, oh my God.
Yeah, but let's not go back to that one. I don't want you to get traumatized back on that for now. Let's go back to the stick structures.
God, they were ugly.
Let's go back.
I mean, I'm sorry, but that's a face only a mother could love.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So you are seeing these stick structures at these new places.
And the guy got really, really, you know, he was like, we need to leave now. And he told us, don't ever come out here without me. I was like, don't worry, I won't. I was like, I'm not really into the wilderness, you know, I'm not a big wilderness, and my boyfriend at the time, we're no longer together, but he's a great guy. But he was like, you know, he would always make jokes like, yeah, she can't plug her blow dryer into the tree, you know. And I was like, you know what? At least, you know, I always, okay, I still get up every night and I check my doors 3 or 4 times a night to make sure they're locked, windows are locked. I have a big pit mastiff, huge, but I know that these things could, but at least they're alarmed. And, but, so after, that, I didn't go out there much. So, about 5 months later, me and him split up, but I stayed living there with my son,
Right.
and my uncle was gonna come down and live with me, okay? Because I wanted to take care of him, because I didn't want him living by himself.
Right.
He's an old hippie, plus my son loves him. One night, my son called me on the cell phone and scared the hell out of me. I'm sorry.
That's
Use
all
my
right.
language.
No, that's okay.
Scared the heck out of me.
Yeah.
And he said, Mom, I'm out in the forest. And he goes, and something, he was with three boys and a girl, right? And he goes, it was something. He goes, I think it's a big bear. He goes, every time we walk, it's stepping with us. It's pacing us. And I go, and I was like, oh my God. I go, do you have your bear spray? And he goes, yeah. And I go, oh, don't worry, I'm coming right now. And my uncle was with me, and he's in good shape. And we came out there, and what was messed up was 3 of the boys that grew up in Tahoe ran off and left them.
Mm-hmm.
And they were in the forest area that was close to the gate, which is close to where we live, where you unlock it and, you can go in there, into the forest. And, my son and that girl kept hearing something pacing them. And he said he turned around and he saw a shadow of something he said that looked like a big man, but it was swaying, in back of a tree. It was a big guy, they said, chasing him.
So did he believe in Bigfoot, or did he know anything about that kind of subject, or did you keep that from him?
I, to be honest, didn't tell him about my past because my son would sneak and watch films when he was little, like Leprechaun and stuff, and it would scare the heck out of him for weeks, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So there was no way I was going to tell him about Bigfoot.
Yeah. I get that,
He'd heard of it because, but he, didn't think, it could exist in his world.
Right.
And I wasn't about to tell him. I wasn't going to do that. And I got out of the house and we ran just down there, and we had, a shotgun with us, because I kept the shotgun. Once I moved there, I was like, oh no, bears, whatever, because the bears would come right up to your window. Right up to your window. They were very... So I was like, are you sure it wasn't a bear, honey? And he goes, no, it was a big guy. He goes, and he was a weirdo. He wouldn't say nothing. And he goes, he was just swaying back and forth. And that's, scared me because I know that when they start swaying, they're working themselves up for a charge.
Right. So before this, was you really even thinking much about Bigfoot being in that area? Is it something you kind of...
No.
Okay.
I thought that was a part of my life I was never going to have to deal with again.
Right.
And we came and, I got my son and the girl, and we, came, locked the gate and, that was that. I thought it was pretty messed up that those other boys left them behind, and the girl had, tripped and fell, and my son ran back and got her.
Right.
And, she had spent the night. She was so scared, We called her parents, and, she stayed the night. I made her, she slept out on the couch, So it was fine. But, I just told my son it was just some weirdo, out in the woods. And I, didn't think any more about it for a while. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And then, this is when things got to the point to where it was time to leave.
Hold on, just a second. So I want everybody that is listening to understand you had this other encounter when you were young, and kind of like I did, I put my encounters out of my mind, and I never thought of that kind of thing. It was only later that something happened that triggered me to think about it, and then I kind of acknowledged that happened. So you were at this point where you were not thinking of Bigfoot, really. You weren't, you were not really telling your son anything about it, because you had put that traumatic event out of your mind, and it just wasn't really going to be part of your world until now. So go ahead and continue.
The second thing that happened was one night, my son he was 16 and a half, 17. His girlfriend was spending the night. Okay. She was asleep out in the pull-out bed in the front room. He was asleep in his bedroom because, She was allowed to spend the night, but, I'm a Christian. They're not sleeping in this, no.
Not going to be a grandma just yet, huh?
So I was, I had his dog, I had Chico, our big pit mastiff, on the bed with me. And all of a sudden, he started growling real low. It wasn't his normal growl. I've never heard the dog actually do this growl. It was like, what's up with you? I go, is that one of the raccoons? I go, I wouldn't hear the raccoons around our house, actually, except for in the winter.
Right.
In the summer, they didn't come around that much on the roof or anything. They were, in this winter, they were bouncing off the walls, but, all of a sudden, because like I said, there was trees, big trees all around us. I used to get this really creepy feeling, like sometimes, that there was something, in those trees. It was just, I can't explain it. I heard this scream that sounded like a banshee. Oh my God, it sounded like,
did it sound similar to the one you heard earlier, or was it kind of different?
Oh no, it sounded like a woman being murdered, but it didn't sound like a woman.
Right.
It sounded deeper, and it screamed. And this thing could scream. And, I mean, it went on for a good 5 minutes. I was like, and other people, that lived in back of me, they were like, what the hell is that?
Okay.
And the other thing that was a little creepy about around there, I would ask people, did you hear anything? And this one man that lived back but to the side of me, they were a couple, they had their house built, right?
Yeah.
But they had their house built, like, I'd lived there for 3 years, okay? So this stuff was paced out, okay, over a period of time. They were building a house like you would think they were building Fort Knox.
Okay.
All right?
Yeah.
And I'm not kidding. all around the house was 12-foot cement fence. You know what I mean? Going all around the property, and then there was the wiring around the top of it and floodlights. God, and I hated those damn floodlights because if anything, you know, because there's bears, like I said, and everything around there. So if anything, you know, set off the floodlights, it would shine in my bedroom window. So I had to get like a darker blinds. I had to get black blinds, you know, to black it out.
Right.
And I slept with the eye mask on. I was like, oh my God. So they were finishing up the property, and they were moving in because they were there. I know that night that it happened, that I heard that because I'd seen them earlier that day. You know, I could see them in the backyard, you know, from mine, because we were right up next to each other. We were real close. And I was talking to his wife, and I said, God, did you hear that scream? She goes, yeah. She goes, who couldn't hear it? And he goes, it was a bear. And I go, bears don't scream. They go, poof, poof, you know, make that noise. I go, what bear screams like that? And he got really angry at me, and he goes, it was a bear. And he grabbed his wife, and he goes, come on, we got to go back to building. I mean, he was obsessed with building Fort Knox. I mean, he was building that place up like, and I go, at least you're protected. He goes, yeah, well, if anything hits my, you know, hits up against our house, you know, it won't, you know, make it dead. And I go, oh, you mean when one of the cars goes around, you know, because you have to go, the cars go around, you know, the houses, and sometimes they would speed down and occasionally hit people's fences if they weren't, you know, slowing down enough. And he goes, or that. He was really weird. And then my hippie uncle starts doing the thing that now I know you shouldn't do. Because he knows I love animals, and I donate money and time to helping, you know, animals, you know, and he, like if we had a lot of extra food left over, instead of putting it, you know, we'd wait to put it out, you know, because we didn't want the raccoons in it, and we'd tied them up really good, right, to where raccoons couldn't open these garbage cans because they had like a lock on them. You understand? So there's no way they could open those.
Right.
There's just no way. Well, first, it turns out we had an extra old ham and stuff. He was taking all the food and throwing it in the forest. And like I said, that forest, a lot of times people would not leave the gate locked. And you could just get right in, right? Or there was trees all around us. So if you were one of those, if you were a Bigfoot, you just climbed up one of the trees and hopped right over a fence.
Right.
Okay, the people that lived across the little street, they had tons of big trees in their backyard. Just tons. It looks so beautiful in the winter because of the snow. We're talking tons of redwood trees. We were like surrounded by trees. And by the mountains. Like I said,
So it was right on the edge of
400 feet up.
So it was on the edge. Where you were living was right next to a lot of forest.
Yes. Yeah, I was in the forest. We were literally like a piece of land that was cut out of the forest.
Okay.
And
right.
Cement was put down and houses were put in. So it was literally a piece a tract, you know, of homes put into next to the forest.
Okay. So your uncle starts.
Right next to it.
So your uncle starts throwing his food out. So what ends
Yeah,
up?
Tams and all kinds of stuff.
Okay.
And the reason I found out, I was like, "Where are you going with that?" It was a casserole, something left over. He goes, "Oh, I'm just gonna get rid of it." And I go, "Well," we don't put it out on the garbages, we put it and we put in the garbages in here, out there was outside, in this one room we had. It was like a garbage room that was locked up that they couldn't get into because we had a board with little nails sticking out, so they couldn't get in.
And that's mostly for bears up there, right?
Yeah, for bears or raccoons, either one. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
But he felt sorry because we had a winter where there was no snow, and he was worried that the bears weren't eating.
Right.
So he was like, "I was just feeding the bears," and I go, "I know." I go, "I like to feed them too, And he goes, "Well, he goes, I go, "Well, you got to make sure, please, be careful, because they could be out there, and the coyotes were really bad too. They would come in around our place, and they would just go around certain homes. It was weird. They would, and they would, unpack. And what the females do is they try to lure a male dog out, and sometimes the male dog will leave his, hop his fence or whatever, and he'll follow her when she's in a heat, and then he'll get jumped and ate and killed by the rest of the pack. That happens a lot. So you really got to be careful.
All right.
So this is when I said that's it. Oh God, this is so gross. My garbages started getting broken into certain times of the month.
Okay. Around that cycle, basically?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
And this is the weirdest thing. One time, one of our garbages was all the way out by we found the garbage finally. It was clear out by the forest gate. Okay, this is just one of the times. And it was, the lock was ripped right off of it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, and, everything was torn out of it, and the pads and stuff were just tore up and shredded all over the place. It was disgusting. And, I had to clean that up.
Right.
Yeah. And I was like, oh my God. Then one time, all of us, neighbors, we really were locking our garbages up, and all 6 garbage cans were stolen. And they were found down outside of the complex.
Okay.
Going towards into the forest. There's 2 ways in. There was one way you could go into the forest through the gate, or once you come into the complex, if you go just before you go in, if you go around the complex, once you go outside of it, you can get into the forest if you go back and around.
Okay.
And the garbages were dragged all the way out there, and they were all ripped. And the food or whatever was ripped out of them, and everybody was like, "Who would do this?"
Right. That was safer to just take the whole can and go break it open.
Yeah.
Okay, so they were just taking the cans and then taking them out and then getting the contents.
And then there was a lot of coyotes that kept coming around my house. And then we kept hearing, noises out by the yard, and the dogs were getting really agitated, and they would just go crazy, and they would growl, and they would get, they'd start shaking. And then this is the last thing that made me and my uncle realize that's it. One day we went for a walk. It was really pretty in the forest. We had all three of the dogs. As we started to go over this little walkway, like it's a little bridge with water, the two little ones, their hats went up and they would not move, and they were shaking, scared, just shaking. You couldn't move them. You would have had to drag them by the throat. Do you understand?
Mm-hmm.
And then the big one, my pit mastiff, started growling. His hacks were up, and I was like, "Is there a bear?" I was looking around, and I got that weird feeling of being watched. And we were pretty far in, and I said, "Grab Chico, grab him by the, his nip, real tight." And I said, "I'm going to grab these two little ones and put them under my arm." And I said, "Let's go straight, cut through, and go straight through, because I didn't want." Something told me not to go back back the way we came. I said, "Just go straight. We're going to go straight through, because that leads out to the highway, and where all the restaurants and stuff are at. But we got to cut through."
Right.
And we just ran and, grabbed the dog and started running. And they were shaking. My one dog peed on herself again. I don't know what it is with the dogs urinating on themselves, but
they get
started
scared.
to smell like a skunky smell this time. Didn't smell like the rotten meat, but it smelled like a skunk. But I told my uncle, I confided in him, and he believed me,
Right.
And we got out of there, and I started looking for a place, and we moved. That was that.
Right. Well, that probably was good to do that,
And what's interesting? They were never able, that place was marked really cheap, right? And I told you how beautiful it was. And Tahoe property is pretty expensive. They could never keep that place rented. And it sat for 3 years with nobody in it before I took it. And they were willing to take another $100 off the rent if I'd stay.
So you think they was knowing that there was stuff spooking the people off or something?
Yeah, but they never wanted to live. They never lived there.
Right. Yeah, well, I guess they knew something was going on.
Well, what was weird was people would move in and they would move out real quick, especially the people that were up against the forest more,
Right.
the trees more. They would really move out. And the coyotes, were people's dogs were getting killed, and like their necks would be ripped out, and people kept saying, "Oh, the coyotes did it." Well, how did the coyote get your dog out of that fence? How did the coyote get the fence open when there's a log on? Come on, your dog can't open the gate.
Right. No. So the
And
gate.
there was a big dog at the end of this. This is another thing that really it broke my heart. There was a big dog named Bear, and he was huge. And it was my dog and that dog that were the biggest dogs, right? And this dog was older. And oh my God, one night we heard him, do that noise, and I was like, "What's going on?" And I was scared to go out, so I called the police, and the police came out, and the people weren't home at the time, and they didn't go out too much. They were, all the elderly couple, but once in a while, every month they would go out, I guess when they got their check, and they would go to the casino and have dinner, maybe play a little roulette or whatever.
Yeah.
It would be like only once a month they would go out. But we'd always watch their house and stuff because my son always, he wouldn't take money, he wouldn't refuse it. But when the winter came, my son would shovel everybody's house, go along and shovel all the people's houses. And then if you were going somewhere, he would shovel out the front of your car and start your car up for you.
Well, that was nice.
Well, that's the way I raised him.
Yeah.
To walk on the outside of the street with the ladies, And I make organic dog food, and I used to give it to everybody for their dogs. But Bear's neck was twisted. The dog's neck was twisted all around, and it was a huge German Shepherd. So the police said it was some vandals, and I was like, my God,
Yeah. So
These people were so upset that after that they sold their property and they moved.
Yeah, it takes something. It takes hands
there.
to build a twist to an act, doesn't it? I mean, you have to have hands to be able to do that. And
you know what? I think sometimes, I know this is going to sound, maybe I'm sound crazy, but I think sometimes the coyotes are like their dogs. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes the Sasquatch's dogs are hunt with them. Do you know what I mean? Or tip them off if people are in the woods.
Yeah.
Do you understand what they do their bidding like? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. It seems like they have some kind of relationship with them. And the dog man thing, it seems like they do for sure. Sometimes they'll be running with the coyotes. And so, yeah, a lot of times when you hear howls, if you listen to the howls on it. Pardon?
I think that the dog man was something in the lab, possibly.
Yeah, I mean,
come on, we can clone so many things, and if people think that the government's not cloning other things, did you know that they crossbred a sheep with some spider DNA, and the sheep was able to produce a milk that came out like a web.
Yeah, I heard something about that. Yeah, that's
very bizarre.
That's not good. I mean, come on, that's going too far. Yeah. Yeah, I think, I don't know for sure, about the dog man. I kind of speculate, but they have been around for a lot longer than we've been cloning, because even
have they?
Oh yeah, people used to report them even way back in India and things like that. Even down in Australia, there's
Egypt don't they? The Egyptians have a dog man
Anubis.
They have the dog's head and the man's body.
Right. Yeah. There's that. Yeah, Anubis, and there was an Anubis-like carving found in Australia, but the dogman thing, they were some of the kings and stuff over in Europe or Asia Minor areas and places like that. They would trade and give things to these dog-headed, dog men type people. Sometimes they even supposedly hired them to battle, and these dog men type things were known to be silk weavers And that, I mean, that's just the stories that come, but they gave tribute to them because they were such fierce warrior type things back in those days. And it was said that they even had hired them for to fight, to be in battles and things like that. Now, I don't know how true all that is, but there are a lot of old paintings and iconography, carvings and things like that that are way back and ancient of these dog-headed. That's what they would call them in those days, was dog-headed men. And but there's lots of stories that go way back of the dog man. So there's nothing new. The Native Americans.
Do you think Sasquatches and them have ever fought each other?
Pardon?
Do you think that the Sasquatches and the dogmen have ever fought each other, or
Yeah. I think they have. Well, there's one story that I had on the channel here not too long ago when I was interviewing a Dark Waters channel guy.
Oh, yes, it's a very good channel.
Yeah, he was telling of a story from, I think it was in Missouri, and the Native Americans way back that had owned this land that these people ended up buying and having problems with the dogmen. But the Native Americans actually went a 3-day journey and stole some Sasquatch bones and brought them back because they knew that the Sasquatch would be mad about it. And they basically went up there and grave robbed, which I really believe that a lot of the burial mounds where you have these elongated skulls, those are actually Sasquatch skulls. And they went up there and stole like a skull and some bones of a Sasquatch and brought it down just to get the Sasquatch mad and come down and to battle these dogmen that the Indians were having problems with. And I guess it was a pretty formidable battle, between them. And so that makes me think that, for one, the Sasquatch bury their dead. And I think that a lot of the burial mounds that some people say, oh, this is Indian burial mounds and things like that, I think some of them in the past were maybe the Native Americans, I don't know, but I think the Sasquatch built some of those mounds. I really do, because how else would the Native Americans know where to go get the bones? They knew where they were, and maybe those serpentine-like mounds that you find up there, and I think it's Ohio area. Maybe that was a Sasquatch mound, because I mean, a lot of times we look at those type things, and our scientist people tell us what the history was, but I don't think that they're right half the time. And so anyway, that's just a little tidbit of something there. Interesting, though.
Well, I'll tell you, Brenton, I think God put you in my path. What you do is wonderful. You are a good Christian man. You help so many people. And I know you do this, for, the sake of helping people, because I know you're not, getting probably super rich off this, although you deserve to make good money. I hope you're making something. Anything, I could ever do to help, please let me know. There's been so many nights I've had anxiety and stuff, and just listening to you talk and how you take the time to talk to people and you don't make fun of them, and you don't.
Right. I get a lot of people.
You don't bow bashing and laughing and making you feel stupid. It's taking me so long to talk about this with anybody.
Right. You know, I started it out, and I was certainly trying to help people, but I didn't really know exactly how that was going to end up working out, and I get feedback sometimes that it helped people, and it's kind of unbelievable how that it's like I'm talking about this stuff and it's helped people. It's amazing, but it really it's just something I believe God blessed. It's not me. I'm just a regular person like everybody else, and I believe in God,
So are you a believer in the messenger isn't important, the message is?
I try to stick.
The messenger isn't important, it's the message that's important.
I always try to point to the Lord as important, and that way I don't get prideful. I think it's dangerous to let yourself get prideful, and it's not too hard to do.
That's what you do. That's what I was trying to say. You are one of the few, except for I will say those men, those nice gentlemen that run that Bigfoot Outlaw.
Yeah.
They seem very genuine, like you.
Yeah.
And the gentlemen
I really like those guys. Yeah, Bear and Kumbo and the other fellow there. I think.
God bless them.
Yeah.
If they ever hear this, I got
Oh, I'm sure they listen to some of them. But yeah, those guys are super awesome, and I sent them an invite.
Fan. I think you were just the coolest.
Well, I sent them an invite to come on the show. I wanted to interview them, and I hope that me covering kind of the supernatural element a little bit, and it's just my theories, that it's what I think. And if you think I'm wrong, you don't have to get upset about it, but my opinion shouldn't make someone mad. But I have a lot of respect for them guys, and I've learned a lot from listening to them. So I hope they will take up my invite. They did send a message back to me and said that they were going to pass the information on to Bear, and I hope that they will come on and do an interview. But I do know that they're busy, and there's certain seasons that they're more busy than others. But I really believe that they would be totally respectful, and I do think that at some point I might have them on. I've had Vic Cundiff on, I've had J.C. Johnson, and and some other people that I think they would be the same way, and so yeah, they're pretty cool fellas for sure.
Well, now I'm doing a lot of studying on Sasquatches sitting behind the desk. I've had, I think, about as much up close and personal as I want to get.
Yeah.
I think now I'm just reading and studying and learning as much as I can.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I have a lot of friends that are Native Americans. I buy a lot of books, anything. I'm really, I don't know if you've ever saw the Thinker Thunker channel.
Yeah, I have.
I think a lot of what he does is really helpful,
Yeah,
because I appreciate the way he breaks things down.
Yeah, he's really good at it, that's for sure. And
yeah, isn't he? And I've supported it, and that, money, for coffee or whatever he calls it, is coffee fun,
Yeah.
There's been some really good, and look at Dr. Melba Ketchum.
Right.
That poor woman, they tore her apart.
Right, yeah.
I mean, she was, here, the Sasquatch community wanted somebody, that was the real deal, and she's a real doctor, okay?
Right.
As far as I know, if I'm wrong, and the listeners
she's a veterinary doctor.
Forgive me.
She was a veterinarian doctor, but she's a legit doctor, and a legit. She was one of the really top specialist for doing DNA, forensic DNA stuff. Not just DNA studies, but she was a forensic scientist and a veterinary doctor, which is a doctor. You know, I mean, she's a legit doctor for sure. Yeah. She was highly respected before that.
Brenton, and I'm going to say something, and it's going to be kind of controversial, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So, Lord, forgive me if I offend anybody, okay? And I don't mean to, but I think, what's the best way if a woman, not just a woman, anybody comes along and gets real information? What's the best way to shut it down? Make her look like a kook.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
She came out with the DNA study. From what I read from a lot of people, you know, I read a lot. I really have been reading a lot, and I figured, and I wanted to ask you this, Brenton. Do you think that me finding out more about what these creatures are? Do you understand? Once you know your enemy, or I'm not necessarily saying my enemy, but what you're scared of, once you know what it is, then, you get less scared. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Right, yeah.
Once you know what you're dealing with.
Right. I agree. Yeah.
And that's all I'm trying to do. And a lot of times at night when I have really bad panic attacks, I'll find one of your shows. And I don't know if this will help other people, but this has helped me. And it's helped me get off of the clozapam that the doctor had to write for me because I was having seizures. It got so bad, I started having such bad seizures. I was foaming at the mouth. It was really bad.
Right.
And I got a headphone, that you could just put over your ears. And I would turn on my phone, right? And I'd turn on one of your channels. I'd get all comfortable in bed, get a hot cup of tea, get my dogs all, cuddled up next to me, and I would listen to one of your channels. And it would put me, it would relax me. And I don't mean to say this like you put me to sleep, but sometimes I would listen to it and it would put me in a nice, calm, relaxed state.
Right.
And I would sometimes, I would listen to the whole channel, but by the end I would, fall asleep and I would just go off into a dream state, and I would sleep peacefully. I didn't have to take anything for sleeping or, take, medicine for anxiety.
Right. Yeah. I've had a few people tell me they suffer from severe pain and they listen to my shows and it helps them. That's quite incredible. I'm glad they get something that good out of it, but my goodness.
You were helping people. You helped me.
Yeah, I don't know how it was helping pain. That's quite incredible. But they said it did.
You have a very soothing voice.
Wow.
And I think that is a very soothing. It was a gift that the Lord gave you. We're all special.
That's right.
Each and every one of us, and we're not meant to all look the same. If God, everybody gets so caught up in, looks, and if anybody knows about that, being somebody that models for years, I understand that, okay? And I try to tell people it's not about what's on the outside. When I would date somebody, it would be about what's on the inside. I never picked somebody by what they looked like on the outside. It was how they treated me.
No, that's smart because
I finally realized, it took me years to realize this finally, that I felt like how I described it to my son, and he cried. He goes, "Mom, that's so sad." He goes, "I felt like a pretty car that nobody bothered to check under the hood."
Right.
You know, like a used, really nice car, but nobody checked under the hood to see if it ran good. You know, how it was on the inside.
Right. Well, there's people out there that would appreciate you, I'm sure, and it just I believe that when you pray and you ask the Lord to give you someone.
Yeah, I'm just right now deciding that I'm staying in touch with the Lord. I'm trying to dealing with the Sasquatch and realizing what I saw was not a cartoon in a child's mind. What I saw was real.